Picture this. 6 years ago, you were pulling in $48,000 a year. You had a roommate. You drove a car with a cracked dashboard and an O cord dangling out of the radio. And you remember thinking, crystal clearly, almost like a prayer, if I could just get to 70 grand, I'd be fine. 70 grand and I'm done worrying. That number felt like a finish line, like there was an actual version of your life on the other side of it that was quieter, calmer, lighter somehow. Well, today you're making 73,000, and not only do you still feel financially stressed, if you're being honest with yourself, you feel more stressed than you did back then. Not less, more. The anxiety is sharper. The paycheck disappears faster. The breathing room you were so sure was coming, it never quite arrived. Sound familiar? Because here's what's interesting about that feeling, and this is the part that's going to reframe everything you thought you knew about money. It's not actually a money problem. I know, it feels like a money problem. But what if that answer has been wrong this entire time? What if the reason more money never feels like enough isn't because you don't have enough, but because your brain, your actual biological hardware, was never designed to let it feel like enough? I'm James, and what I'm about to show you today completely changed how I think about income, spending, and what financial freedom actually means. There's a documented psychological mechanism running in the background of your financial life right now, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Stay with me because the way out is not what you'd expect. If this channel is the kind of place you want to be, hit subscribe. We're a community of people who actually want to think differently about money, not just accumulate it, but understand it. Now let's get into it. What you've been experiencing, that gap between the raise you expected to change everything and the reality that it changed almost nothing, has a name. Psychologists call it hedonic adaptation. And once you understand what it actually is, it permanently rewires how you see your financial life. Here's what your brain actually does. Every time something good happens, a raise, a new apartment, a car that doesn't smell like old gym bag, your brain registers the improvement. There's a genuine spike in satisfaction. Life feels measurably better. And then over a period of weeks or months, something quiet and almost invisible starts to happen. Your brain recalibrates. The new salary becomes the new normal. The nicer apartment stops being the nice apartment and starts being just the apartment. The thing that used to make you happy gets folded into the baseline, and the baseline moves up, and you're right back where you started emotionally, but you're spending more to stay there. The treadmill isn't a metaphor for being lazy or ungrateful. It's a metaphor for a very specific mechanical trap. You run and the belt moves under you, and you run harder and the belt matches you, and no matter how fast you go, the scenery doesn't change. That's hedonic adaptation in one image. The research behind this goes back further than most people realize, and the original study is one of the most counterintuitive things I've ever read. In 1978, psychologists Philip Brickman and Donald Campbell compared the happiness levels of three groups: lottery winners, people who had been paralyzed in accidents, and a control group of ordinary people going about their lives. The lottery winners, people who had won hundreds of thousands of dollars, reported being barely happier than the control group after the initial rush faded. The accident survivors, after the acute phase of grief passed, reported happiness levels strikingly close to where they'd been before the accident. Brickman and Campbell called this the hedonic treadmill, the idea that human beings have a happiness set point and that major life events pull us temporarily away from it before we drift back. Now, the timeline on this is important because it's faster than you'd expect. For most positive financial changes, like a raise, a bonus, a new purchase, the adaptation process takes somewhere between 3 and 6 months. 3 to 6 months for your brain to fully absorb the improvement and treat it as the new floor. That car that felt incredible for a few weeks, by month 8, you're basically invisible to it. The salary that felt huge when you signed the offer letter, by month 4, it just feels like what you make. And look, before you say, okay, but I've had raises before and I definitely feel better than I would have without them, yes, absolutely. The research doesn't say hedonic adaptation erases all progress. It says adaptation is asymmetric. You lose more of the happiness gain than you keep. You run hard, the treadmill slows to match you, and you end up a few feet ahead of where you started, but nowhere near where you thought you'd be. This brings us to one of the most discussed studies in personal finance, and the number at the center of it is going to stick with you. The 2010 paper by Daniel Kahneman and Angus Deaton, both Nobel laureates, analyzed data from over 450,000 Americans and found that emotional well-being improved with income, but stopped improving meaningfully around $75,000 a year. Above that threshold, more money didn't make people feel better on a day-to-day basis. Read that again. Above 75 grand, adjusted for inflation, that's roughly 95 to $100,000 today. Additional income stopped translating into measurable gains in daily emotional well-being. Now, that finding got updated, and the update is actually more unsettling than the original. In 2021, Matthew Killingsworth at Wharton ran a larger study and found that happiness does continue to rise past the threshold, but at dramatically diminishing rates. You get a certain amount of happiness from going from 50,000 to 100,000. You get a fraction of that going from 100,000 to 200,000. The math stops working in your favor somewhere between that first and second doubling. Diminishing marginal utility, economists call it more money, but exponentially less happiness per dollar. So let's make this real. And I want you to watch this math slowly because this is where most people have their oh no moment. Let's say you're making $60,000 a year and you land a promotion that takes you to 80,000. That's an extra 20 grand. In take-home pay after taxes, you're looking at maybe an additional $1,300 or $1,400 a month hitting your account. This should be a genuine game changer, right? Here's how it actually plays out. You move into a slightly nicer apartment, maybe $250 more per month. Feels like a reasonable upgrade for the new income bracket. Your old car, look, it's been embarrassing you in the parking lot for a while now, gets traded in. New lease, maybe $270 a month on top of what you were paying before. You start eating out a little more, not extravagantly, just more frequently. There's a new streaming service or two, a gym membership in a better part of town, a few more Amazon purchases that feel small in isolation. You upgrade your phone, you go on a vacation you actually enjoy instead of a budget version of one. Add it up line by line and you're spending, not unusually, not recklessly, just naturally, the way people at that income level tend to spend. Somewhere between $1,100 and $1,300 more per month than you were before. You just gave yourself a raise and ended up with almost nothing extra, not because you made bad decisions, because the invisible escalator of lifestyle inflation moved right alongside you and you didn't notice it happening. This is the treadmill in real dollars, and the data on how common this is should genuinely stop you for a moment. According to a Bank of America survey from 2023, 52% of Americans earning between $100,000 and $150,000 live paycheck to paycheck. Over half the people making 100 grand or more, people who, by any historical standard, are doing extraordinarily well, report having essentially no financial cushion. Not because they're irresponsible, because they're running ancient software in modern hardware. Here's what I mean. Your brain evolved in a world of genuine scarcity. In that world, the right move when things got better was to consume more immediately, because abundance was temporary and saving for a future that might not come was a bad bet. That instinct made perfect evolutionary sense for hundreds of thousands of years. It makes almost no sense in a world where you can lock a portion of your income into index funds and let compound interest do something that would have looked like actual magic to your ancestors. Your brain isn't broken, it's running 200,000-year-old code in a world that changed about 150 years ago. Now, here's where it gets genuinely interesting because most people stop at the diagnosis. They learn about hedonic adaptation, feel briefly enlightened, and then go back to doing exactly what they were doing before. What I want to show you is the part that actually changes behavior, and it starts with one of the most counterintuitive findings in this space. Psychologists Thomas Gilovich and Leif von Boven have demonstrated repeatedly that experiential purchases, travel, concerts, meals that become stories, skills you learn, resist adaptation far more effectively than material purchases. The new couch adapts within weeks. The camping trip where everything went slightly wrong and you ended up laughing about it for years, that doesn't adapt. It compounds, it becomes part of your identity and your relationships in a way that physical objects almost never do. So, on a pure happiness per dollar basis, you are systematically overpaying when you convert income into possessions and underpaying when you convert it into experiences. That's not a lifestyle preference. That's a measurable arbitrage opportunity built into human psychology. There's also a 2017 study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences that found people who spent money on time-saving purchases, things like hiring out chores, paying for convenience, reported meaningfully higher life satisfaction than people who spent the equivalent amount on material goods. The gap between money spent on your time and money spent on your stuff is one of the most underpriced insights in personal finance. And I can already hear the objection forming. Okay, James, so I'm just supposed to never want anything better for myself, never upgrade, never improve, just accept where I am? No, that's not what this is about. The point is to understand the difference between a conscious, intentional upgrade that genuinely aligns with what you value and the slow, invisible, unconscious drift of lifestyle inflation that happens to you while you're not paying attention. One upgrade feels like a choice. The other feels like water rising around you. The practical mechanism that changes this is something called a lifestyle anchor. And it's simpler than it sounds. When your income increases, you make a deliberate in advance decision about what percentage of that increase goes toward lifestyle and what percentage goes toward your future. A common version is the raise splitting rule. Take your next raise, and before you touch it, decide that 70% goes directly to savings and investing, and 30% goes to quality of life improvements. Some people do 50-50. The specific split matters less than the act of deciding first before the spending patterns have a chance to form on their own. The lifestyle anchor is how you get off the treadmill without giving up forward progress. You let yourself enjoy more, you just don't let your brain silently consume all of it. There's also something in the Stoic tradition called negative visualization that sounds bleak. And bear with me here because the actual effect is the opposite of what you think. For a few minutes, you vividly imagine losing something you currently have, your income, your health, your relationships, not to catastrophize, just to briefly reactivate how good something is before your brain fully adapts to it. The ancient software gets tricked into noticing abundance again, and there's real data behind it. People who regularly practice this kind of mental contrast report significantly higher baseline satisfaction with their current circumstances. And here's something that doesn't get talked about enough, and this one hit me harder than anything else in this research. It's called the arrival fallacy, the psychological phenomenon where the destination you've been running toward, the salary, the house, the net worth number, turns out not to contain the happiness you were sure was waiting inside it. I've spoken to people who hit their number, the exact number they had written down, the one that was supposed to be the finish line, and a surprising number of them describe feeling not elated but lost, confused, empty in a way that scared them because they had organized their entire emotional life around a destination, and when they arrived, it didn't have what they thought it had. Happiness doesn't live at the destination, it lives in the direction of travel. This connects directly to why investing, real, consistent, boring investing, matters in a way that goes beyond the math. When you take $25 and put it to work at a 4% safe withdrawal rate, you've just created $1 of permanent annual passive income. $1 that works forever, that doesn't ask for anything, that doesn't get burned out or distracted. Do that a few thousand times, and you've bought something most people never actually acquire. Genuine time. Not more stuff. Time. Time that belongs to you. That's the real version of what everyone thinks they're buying when they upgrade the car or move to the nicer neighborhood. The treadmill sells you the feeling of freedom while keeping you on the belt. Investing actually buys the thing. The treadmill doesn't have a finish line. That's the truth at the center of all of this. No income level, no net worth number, no square footage automatically delivers you to the other side of wanting more. The brain adapts, the baseline moves. The gap reopens, and the only way to actually step off, not pause, not slow down, but genuinely step off, is to stop believing that the finish line exists somewhere ahead of you and start designing a life where the meaning lives in the running itself, in the direction, in the craft of building something real. 6 years ago, you were making $48,000, wishing for 70. Today, you're at 73, and the feeling is somehow the same. Not because you failed, not because you're broken or ungrateful or bad with money, because you were running a rigged race and nobody told you the rules. Now you know the rules. You know the name of the thing, you know what your brain is doing and why, and you know how to work with it instead of being quietly controlled by it. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. Before you go, drop a comment below. I'm curious, when did you first notice that hitting a financial milestone didn't feel the way you expected it to? What was the number and what was the feeling when you got there?